let's move on to this. So Richard, speaking of, I know we talk about him a lot tonight, but he's had some amazing tweets here over the last couple of weeks. And I think we should, or last week, I should say, we should start out with this liquidity bonding within PulseChain, I think. If you could find that one, Ewok, and how Pulse and Hex are tied together. One, of course, will make the whole ecosystem rise. And this one was, I think, kind of a weighty tweet, yeah. But let's get into it a little bit. I'll do my best to kind of TLDR it, like on AI or something like that. And then we could discuss it, because I think he's really, like, this is really important. Like a lot of his tweets, we always talk about how you feel like you have to decode them a little bit, like Pink Floyd song lyrics or something. I think that's what we have a little bit with this one. So people speak with certainty about things they don't understand. Richard Hart educates you today. Hex is primarily paired with Pulse. If people buy Pulse to buy Hex, it drives up the price of Pulse and Hex versus the dollar at the same time. It's reflexive. AMM example people are used. $1 of DAI and one of Hex in a Pulse X pair. Someone pays one DAI, $1 of DAI, and gets 0.5 Hex. Now the Hex price is $4. Example, Richard Hart teaches you $1 of DAI and one Pulse in a pair. One Hex and one Pulse in a pair. Hex is $1 because it trades for one with Pulse, and Pulse is $1 in this example. Someone pays $1 of DAI to get half a Pulse. Now the price of Pulse is $4. Then they pay the 0.5 Pulse. They got to buy Hex from the Hex Pulse pair. This moves the price of Hex up 2.25x versus Pulse. Price moves as a square in Pulse X pairs, because that's how X times Y equals K. Automated market maker systems work. Since you added 50% to the Pulse and the Hex Pulse pair, 1.5x times 1.5x equals 2.25x. So now your $1 of DAI moved Pulse up 4x, and Hex versus Pulse is up 2.25x. So now a Hex is 4x times 2.25x equals 9x higher price. That's how reflexive systems work. You moved a thing up, and a thing up, and moved another thing up as well. These are estimates. You have to stick to the real numbers in there, and there's pairs to stables which aren't as reflexive. So TLDR, people are underestimating price moves because they're not counting for reflexivity in things that are paired with other things that are paired with stables. Rough examples here. This is not advice of any kind. Do your own research. So this is really interesting. And obviously we know, like, the liquidity, like, everything's going to kind of tend to rise together, but talk about the reflexivity that he's talking about here, because I do think that that's something that we take for granted. Maybe people don't recognize, and might be responsible for, like, how we're seeing some of these prices, especially with Hex recently, just fly, which I think is probably why we got this tweet at that time. But yeah, what do you make of this?
Well, yeah. So one of the things I always think of when people are talking about this type of thing, they don't understand how liquidity works. Johnny Chaos has a good video out there with jars and marbles in the jar, and it talks about what happens when you add or remove, what things become. And I don't think people understand that it's not just a one-to-one or something's going to go up. There's always that multiple. Because the X times Y equals K formula, especially with these automatic market makers like the Uniswaps and the Pulse X's and the things like that. This does not have anything to do with single-sided liquidity. That's another thing that's not talked about here, is how that kind of screws up this formula. But to his point, is when major pairs are tied like that, if there's a large influx to Pulse to then buy Hex, you've done crazy things with just that, with those two buys to the whole ecosystem. So, we always say that the rising tide lifts all boats, but in this sense, it's even multiplied, right? Because of those bonded liquidity pairs. Now you see all these people creating these other things out there, their products that, they tie them to these other tokens for that reason, right? They want their tokens to do well, and when people buy them, it can reflexively help out the other tokens. I'm not sure still how I feel about those. There's something to be said for the different things, and it's great to see people doing it, but sticking with the bonded pairs in this particular instance, it can really multiply, and it doesn't take as much to pump things as people would like to believe. It's one of the reasons why EHEX can pump that much harder, and we've seen it do some crazy things. And sometimes people make fun of us for saying that it can reach parity, but it would take a lot less money to have that done. Now,
Mhm.
a sell can also hurt as well. So, that is the opposite side of all of this, is when you do have smaller amounts of liquidity, the sells will torch the price just as easy as buys jack it up. So
Mhm.
that is something that you have to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, Richard has always been super educational, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people miss his streams, because he
Yeah.
does teach these things that most people don't understand. I don't know if you remember some of these streams when he had some haters on there and he was explaining some of these concepts to them who they claimed to be market makers and things like that, but they didn't understand the automatic market maker situations with like Uniswap, for example, at that point. Um, and I think people learn a lot from him. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, the TLDR of it is, one buy to go into one coin can really increase a lot of things all around it. So
Mhm.
it's pretty neat. He doesn't even bring up PulseX. And that's a whole other system in itself because of the buy and burn. You're not even figuring that in when you do trade on there. It affects that too. So yeah,
Yeah.
these things are all tied together. So I think they did it in such a way that um, when things run, they're really going to run, and we're kind of seeing that now as the sellers have gotten exhausted. Some smaller buys, some people coming in with smaller things are definitely increasing everything. So it's pretty cool.